For 3 decades I carried within me a heart hardened by rejection, filled with anger, and plagued by misunderstanding. I lived with a bitterness that made it impossible to see the beauty in what I once resisted, a faith that seemed so distant and foreign to me. I looked at Christianity through the lens of skepticism, dismissing its teachings, its followers, and its promises. Yet, in the midst of my pain, I found myself on a path that would forever change my life. It was in a moment of utter despair, when I felt lost, broken, and without hope, that I encountered something greater than myself, something I never imagined I'd be open to. It wasn't a sermon or a doctrine that saved me. It wasn't the rules or the rituals, but the sheer love and grace that found me in my weakest moment. This story isn't just about religion, it's about transformation. It's about healing the wounds of a heart that once harbored hate and discovering the incredible power of grace. It's about how, through surrender and faith, even the most resistant hearts can find a new life. For 30 long years, my life was defined by rejection, a rejection not just of people, but of a faith that many around me found strength in. There was a deep-rooted hatred, an anger that lived within me every time I heard about Christianity, every time I saw someone professing their belief in Christ. I didn't understand their joy, their peace, their unwavering faith. To me, it seemed like a lie, something that kept people in chains, holding them back from real freedom. I grew up in a world where I was told to question everything, and so I did. I questioned my purpose, my place in this world, and most certainly the notion of a higher power. The teachings of Christianity seemed so contradictory to the world I knew, a world that emphasized self, reliance, and independence. I couldn't comprehend why anyone would need to rely on a God they couldn't see. I believed I could make my own way, chart my own path, without needing anyone or anything beyond my own strength. But somewhere along this journey, something changed. It didn't happen all at once, but over time, as I faced personal struggles, moments of loneliness, and feelings of emptiness that no achievement or possession could fill. I began to feel an ache in my soul, a longing for something deeper, something that the world around me couldn't offer. The more I sought after the things that promised happiness, the more I realized they could not satisfy me. They left me yearning for something more, something that I couldn't articulate, something my mind couldn't fully grasp. It was in this place of vulnerability, at the lowest point in my life, when I was finally willing to listen. I didn't know who or what I was listening for, but I felt an undeniable pull, a whisper in the depths of my heart, calling me to something higher. I resisted at first. My pride, my years of hatred, and my fear of losing control over my life made me hesitant to fully open myself to the possibility of faith. But with each passing day, the desire for peace grew louder than the noise of my doubts. And then I encountered the love of God in a way I never expected. It wasn't in a grand church or during a dramatic sermon. It wasn't through a perfect set of words or a perfectly executed prayer. It was in a quiet moment, sitting in solitude, when I realized that this love, this grace, was not about perfection or meeting any standard. It was about being seen, being accepted, despite all the flaws and the anger that had once defined me. I found that faith wasn't about understanding everything or having all the answers. It was about trust, the kind of trust that lets go of control and surrenders to the unknown. It was in that moment of surrender that I began to experience the peace that had always eluded me. I felt like I had been walking in darkness for years, and suddenly a light pierced through the darkness, illuminating my path. It wasn't an instant transformation, but each day I took a step closer to healing. This journey of faith was not easy. It came with its own struggles and moments of doubt, but the difference was that now I wasn't walking alone. I had found a source of strength greater than my own, a power that could carry me when I was weak and guide me when I was lost. This wasn't just about accepting a set of beliefs. It was about embracing the relationship with a loving God who saw me for who I truly was, who understood my pain, and who offered me grace despite my resistance. As I embraced this new way of living, I began to understand the meaning of redemption. Redemption isn't just about being forgiven, it's about being restored. It's about the healing of old wounds, the mending of brokenness, and the renewal of hope. It's about being transformed from the inside out, and allowing that transformation to ripple out into every area of your life. Where there was once bitterness, there was now peace. Where there was anger, there was now love. The walls I had built around my heart began to crumble, and for the first time I felt truly free. The path from rejection to redemption wasn't easy, but it was worth every step. Every moment of doubt, every struggle, and every challenge along the way was a part of the journey that led me to a place of healing and wholeness. I had spent years rejecting a love that was always there, but when I finally chose to accept it, my life was forever changed. In finding faith, I found my true self, the person I was always meant to be. I discovered that true freedom isn't in doing things on my own terms, but in surrendering to the love and grace that has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. It wasn't until I opened my heart to this love that I truly began to live. Through this journey, I learned that redemption is not just a one-time event. It's a continuous process of renewal and growth. And as I continue on this path, I am reminded every day that the love I rejected for so long is the very thing that has set me free. For many years, I resisted the call to faith, holding on to doubts and fears that kept me from embracing what others found so life-changing. I had lived a life built on skepticism, questioning everything that seemed to promise comfort or purpose beyond what I could understand. To me, the idea of surrendering to something greater, something unseen, felt like weakness. I believed in self-reliance, in my ability to control my destiny, to shape my own future. There were moments, though, in the quiet of my heart, when I wondered if something was missing. I tried filling the emptiness with accomplishments, with possessions, with the approval of others. But none of it brought the lasting peace I was searching for. I didn't know it then, but that ache in my soul was a longing for something far deeper than what the world could offer. For years, I told myself that I didn't need faith, that I could carve my own path without relying on God or anyone else. Yet I found myself alone, often overwhelmed by the burdens of life. It wasn't until I hit a point of total exhaustion that I began to question everything I had believed. Life had tested me in ways I never could have anticipated, pushing me to the brink of despair. In that moment, when I had nothing left to hold on to, I realized that perhaps I had been wrong all along. Perhaps I had rejected what could heal me because I was too proud, too fearful, or too stubborn to embrace it. It was then, in the stillness of my brokenness, that I began to look at Christianity through a different lens, not as a religion of rules, but as a relationship with a loving God who was offering me a way out of my pain. At first, I didn't understand why anyone would surrender their life to this God. I had spent so much of my life pushing him away, believing that I could live without him, that I was too far gone to ever be truly accepted. But as I started to listen, as I opened my heart just a little bit, I began to hear a message that was both foreign and familiar. You are loved, not because of what you've done or who you are, but because of who I am. This message wasn't about judgment. It was about grace, about forgiveness, and about the unconditional love that would never let me go. The journey wasn't easy. It took time for me to let go of the anger and bitterness that had clouded my heart for so long. For years, I had believed that I was too independent, too self-sufficient to need anyone, least of all a God I couldn't see. But in embracing this love, I began to understand that true strength doesn't come from isolation. It comes from community, from knowing that I am part of something much larger than myself. Christianity taught me that faith isn't about perfection. It's about trust. It's about the courage to take a step forward, even when you don't have all the answers. It's about surrendering the control that you've held on to for so long and learning to trust that God's plan for you is better than anything you could have imagined. As I continued this journey, I began to see changes in my life that were nothing short of transformative. The things that once held so much weight, the pursuit of success, the need for validation, began to lose their grip on me. I no longer defined myself by my achievements or my failures. I found that in Christ I didn't have to earn love or approval. I was already accepted, already enough, just as I was. This realization didn't come all at once, but over time I felt a peace wash over me that I had never known before. It wasn't the peace of having everything figured out, but the peace of knowing that I didn't have to. My transformation didn't mean that life became easy. In fact, it often meant the opposite. There were still challenges, still moments of doubt, and still times when I questioned why things were happening the way they were. But through it all, I had a foundation that could not be shaken. Relationship with a God who was bigger than my problems, who offered strength when I was weak, and who gave me hope even in the darkest of times. The more I grew in my faith, the more I understood that Christianity was not a set of rules to follow, but a life to live. It was about how I treated others, how I loved those around me, how I served and cared for the hurting. I realized that the love I had received was not meant to stay with me. It was meant to be shared. I began to see the world through a new lens, one of compassion, forgiveness, and grace. I understood that embracing Christianity was not about achieving some higher status, but about becoming more like Christ, loving without judgment, serving without expecting anything in return, and living with purpose beyond myself. What I once viewed as a burden became a source of strength. The more I embraced Christianity, the more my life aligned with the purpose I had long sought. I was no longer bound by the chains of fear, doubt, and self-reliance. I had found a deeper, more fulfilling way to live, a life of love, service, and faith. The resistance that had defined my earlier years was replaced by a new sense of freedom, a freedom that came from surrendering my heart and trusting that the path I was on was the one I was always meant to walk. I now know that the transformation in my life was not just about finding faith, it was about finding myself. Through Christ, I discovered who I truly was, loved, forgiven, and redeemed, and that was the greatest gift I could ever receive. For many years, I carried the weight of hatred in my heart, a heavy burden that clouded my thoughts and poisoned my relationships. This hatred was not always conscious. It was a slow build, a cumulative result of wounds that I never fully healed. It began with small offenses and grew into something more powerful, more consuming. Every slight, every disappointment, every betrayal fed the fire of anger within me, and before I knew it, this hatred became my identity, the lens through which I saw the world. It shaped how I viewed myself and others, and I was trapped in its grip. I didn't realize how deeply I was affected by this hatred until I started to notice the damage it was doing. It wasn't just that I was angry, it was that this anger had begun to erode the very core of who I was. It seeped into every area of my life, poisoning my relationships, making me suspicious of those around me, and causing me to push away anyone who tried to get close. I thought that by holding on to my anger, I could protect myself, but in reality, I was only hurting myself more. The walls I built to keep others out also kept me from experiencing love, peace, and true connection. This hatred wasn't just about other people. It was about a deeper wound in my own soul. It was the result of years of disappointment, hurt, and disillusionment. I had experienced pain that I couldn't understand or process, and instead of seeking healing, I buried it under layers of anger. I believed that my pain justified my hatred, that my wounds gave me a right to be bitter. But the longer I carried this hatred, the heavier it became. It weighed me down in ways I didn't even recognize. I was not free. I was shackled to my own anger, and it held me captive. It wasn't until I encountered the power of faith that I realized the chains I had wrapped around my heart were not only unnecessary, but they were also self-imposed. I had always believed that forgiveness was a sign of weakness, that letting go of the anger meant I was giving up my right to be right, my right to be hurt. But as I began to open myself to the possibility of faith, I came to understand that true freedom does not come from holding on to resentment. True freedom comes from letting go, from surrendering the very things that keep us in bondage. The process of breaking free from the chains of hatred was not immediate, nor was it easy. It took time for me to truly understand the depth of what faith offered, a way out of the prison I had built for myself. I began to realize that forgiveness was not about excusing the wrongs done to me, but about releasing their power over my life. It was about letting go of the control that hatred had over my heart, and opening myself to the peace that only faith could bring. I had to learn that forgiveness wasn't a one-time act, but a continual process of releasing the bitterness that threatened to consume me. In this journey, I found that healing began not in my own strength, but in surrender. The more I let go of my anger, the more I experienced a deep sense of peace, a peace that came from knowing I didn't have to carry my pain alone. Faith taught me that I didn't have to figure everything out on my own, that there was a power greater than myself that could heal the deepest wounds. This power wasn't about erasing the past or pretending that the hurts didn't matter. It was about offering those wounds to something greater, something more healing than the world had to offer. As I embraced this healing power, I started to see the chains of hatred begin to loosen. It wasn't that the pain of the past went away, it didn't, but I began to view it through a different lens. I no longer saw my pain as something that defined me, something that justified my anger. Instead, I began to see my pain as a part of my story, a story that could be redeemed, transformed, and made whole. I began to understand that faith doesn't erase the past, but it offers a new way to see it. It offers redemption, a chance to take the broken pieces of my life and make them beautiful again. Through faith, I learned that true healing comes not from avoiding pain, but from facing it with courage and grace. It comes from acknowledging the hurt, the betrayal, the disappointment, and choosing not to let those things define who I am. It comes from seeing the world through eyes of compassion, understanding that we all carry wounds, but that we don't have to let those wounds control us. We can choose to heal, to move forward, and to allow our pain to be transformed into something beautiful. Breaking the chains of hatred wasn't about forgetting the wrongs done to me, but about choosing to let go of the power those wrongs had over me. It was about understanding that by holding on to my anger, I was only hurting myself. It was about embracing the truth that forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for me. It's about freeing my heart from the bitterness that held me captive and opening myself to the peace that only faith can provide. The more I let go of my hatred, the more I experienced the transformative power of love. I realized that love doesn't mean excusing hurt, but it means choosing to rise above it. It means choosing to break free from the chains of anger and resentment and embracing the freedom that comes with forgiveness. It means healing the wounds of the past and moving forward with a heart that is open, full of hope, and ready to love again. As I continue on this journey, I know that I am not alone. The power of faith has healed me in ways I never thought possible, and it continues to redeem the broken parts of my heart. I am no longer bound by the chains of hatred. I am free, and in my freedom I am finding peace, joy, and the ability to love others as I have been loved. In embracing faith, I discovered the profound truth that true freedom comes not from holding on to the past, but from letting go of the pain that once defined me. The chains of hatred that had kept me captive for so long slowly loosened, and with each step of forgiveness, my heart began to heal. I no longer allowed anger to shape my identity or dictate my future. Instead, I embraced the peace that comes from surrendering to something greater than myself, from trusting in a love that was always there, waiting for me to open my heart. Through faith, I found redemption, not as an end, but as a continuous process of growth, healing, and transformation. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was worth every moment of struggle. As I released my burdens, I discovered a life filled with grace, compassion, and the ability to love without conditions. The chains of hatred are now broken, and in their place I have found a deeper sense of purpose and a peace that surpasses understanding. The power of faith has redeemed my life, and in that redemption I am learning to live fully, love freely, and walk in the light of hope every single day.